You're a true maverick in so many senses. It's amazing.
I was good enough that I could go out on spacewalks in the Russian spacesuits, and we did 4 spacewalks in my very first mission. And we were very lucky. SpaceX really took their job seriously. It was a lot of healthy tension at the beginning, what Dragon should be. And then SpaceX said, all right, we understand what we need to do. The only thing between you and the stars is the plexiglass, polycarbonate, the helmet. It's amazing. There's only been 700 people or so to fly in space, and that's the past 50 or 60 years of human spaceflight. We can do better. We just returned from SpaceX, and I got my Dragon pilot wing.
What was the general feeling when you first stepped out there? So now that we've got the latest behind us, I want to really discuss, as I researched your background, I discovered you're a true maverick in so many senses. It's amazing. What a career you've had. It's just extraordinary. And, as we research this career, some of these extraordinary components of your background is going to come out. So you grew up, I think in nine brothers and sisters. Is that right?
8 brothers and sisters, a family of 9 children, and I was the oldest. And my father was unemployed for a couple years. There was a large, a big economic turnover, especially for what is now the Rust Belt, and we were right there in the middle of it in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was an interesting time to grow up. Yet, fortunately, we had such a great educational opportunities there that I was still able to do super well. I was, had to go to high school and scholarship, but those things were available. We were very lucky, and was able to go to some very fine schools, and that set me up nicely for a career, and also set me up with a lot of gratitude and wanting to be able to help my country and this planet, so I can use my skills. If that means flying in space now and then, well, so be it.
Your education career is stellar. You went to, private school. It's just amazing that, your family could put all 9 children through that school. It was amazing to learn. And, you were 2.5 sitting in your father's lap when you watched Apollo take off. I was at that point like 21 years old and was so taken with the Apollo. I actually flew to the United States from South Africa for the landing. I was so I actually had private correspondence with Werner von Braun, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. Treasure that correspondence. So you went to this private high school, and then you did dual degrees at MIT. Is that correct?
Yes, I was so happy to be there. It turns out that I didn't know very much about MIT. My first time on an airplane was to go fly there to join the freshman class, and since then I've flown a lot. But the thing is that I just enjoyed what they had to teach, what they had to offer. So I felt like I was at a all-you-could-eat buffet, and I was very glad to take the classes and the courses that were really interesting to me, which were aeronautics and astronautics, and then also planetary science. Those are the kind of things I wanted to work on in my life, and because I was able to do that, study that, then that helped me with my career for sure. But the Air Force paid for it. I had a ROTC scholarship. I learned a lot of things in ROTC, such as leadership and attention to detail and discipline and the operational kind of things that we need to do to be an astronaut. I was learning all of those things at university. What an important 4 years of my life.
What a walking advertisement you are for ROTC. But then you upped and went to Moscow.
Why not?
Why not? Tell us, what a maverick thing to do. Of course, that was a very different time from current day, although we were still in the USSR, right?
Yes, it was the last years of the Soviet Union.
And you had to learn Russian while you were going to school, is that correct?
Well, like most universities, they have requirements that at least from an engineer's or scientist point of view, that you had to do this humanities class. So,
Right.
so you had to study another language. So I signed up for Russian language, not for the strategy of that it would make my grade point average go higher. Engineers always are trying to game the system. It actually brought my grade point average down a little bit. But it was really, I said, well, what do I want to do with my life? So I tried to make strategic decisions when I was 18, 19, 20 years old. And one of it was, I want to go fly in space. Who else flies in space? Soviet Union flies in space. Maybe if I learn their language someday, it might come in handy. Boy, was I lucky with that choice.
No, that was incredible foresight. I mean, incredible foresight. As we'll see from the rest of your career, having that was just extraordinary. Not luck, but foresight. So
there's certainly timing involved, right? And right now we're also at a different time in history. We're among major changes happening right now. So there's a lot of choices that students and professionals can be and perhaps could be making these days too. The late 1980s, as you recall, was a very dynamic time, and we didn't see the collapse of Soviet Union coming. Wow.
Yeah, what a time it was. I mean, it's very vivid in my memory. It was just before I came to the United States. I came to the United States, originally to come to school under John F. Kennedy. He so inspired me. That's why I came, and that was the beginning of my move from South Africa to the United States. But there you were. You were at the Aviation Institute in Moscow. In 1989, and then you became a test pilot. Now, why a test pilot? What was the?
Well, there were a few other steps along the way, but they all happened very quickly. One reason why I was in the Soviet Union was there was a exchange program, the first of its kind, between MIT and Moscow Aviation Institute. So it was a summer program. We were only there for a couple months, but that's when I learned. I mean, I went from a middle. I think I even got C's in the Russian language. But those 2 months with immersion and talking about airplanes and rockets, my language, I found that I had an affinity for immersion. If I'm immersed in a country, I can learn the language a lot faster when there's a real people involved with real conversations, especially about interesting things like rockets. So as soon as I finished that, I went off to Stanford. I had to go to Stanford. I had 8 months before pilot training started. Again, part of the reason why I even had a time to go to Soviet Union and go to Stanford was the Air Force pretty much said, we don't need you for a year. You're a reserve officer. That's the ROTC, reserve officer training, right? So you're a reserve officer. We don't need you for a year. You go figure out to do something. So I tried to make the most of that year. And going to Stanford, I didn't know very much about Stanford, but they had an aero-astro program that I could potentially finish in 9 months. I had 8. I figured that was close enough. I went there on my own dime, no scholarship or anything. I took a nice loan, but boy, what an incredible program! And I went straight from California to Texas to go to undergraduate pilot training with the Euro-NATO Joint Jet pilot training. And I was just on a roll. Everything I was doing was touching gold. I graduated from MIT and then Soviet Union and Stanford. And I went to pilot training. And it took me about 7 months, and I flunked out. So there I had a dose of reality coming to me. Now, of course, there's always a story behind it. I wasn't a horrible pilot by any means, but this time. The Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training for the U.S. Folks, where they guaranteed you a fighter. Everybody there was going to go to a fighter airplane, which takes a little bit more skill, perhaps, depending on who you ask, what kind of pilot you ask. But getting into a fighter jet was always very difficult. I lucked out by getting into the Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training. But I also talk about timing. Sometimes it works out for you, sometimes it doesn't. We were having a major reduction in with the peace dividend at that time. So the Air Force was getting rid of about half of its fighter fleet. So half of my classmates didn't graduate either. The other half got delayed for 3 years before they got into a cockpit. And during those 3 years, I was able to able to accomplish other things. It was a very bad day when I got removed from pilot training. I'd never really failed anything before, and it definitely taught me humility. It also showed me that I was also resilient, because I felt bad for about a week, and it happened on my birthday.
Oh, my God.
Oh no, it gets better. My girlfriend broke up with me on that day, and I think if I had a dog, it would have gotten hit by a car. It was just one of those classic country western songs. There was good news out of it, is that I had time, and the Air Force said, "All right, this isn't working out for you. What else can we do?" And I reached out to my friends. Turns out networking, even in the early 1990s, worked really well. And the Air Force found a spot for me in Los Angeles, working on a satellite program for testing satellites. And I worked on that in the acquisition area, and I learned so many things about contract management, as well as technical testing of satellites, that it really was a good application. Another way to become an astronaut at that time was to become a mission specialist, not just a pilot. That's what I was hoping to be at the very beginning, was to be the kind of a pilot astronaut. But I ended up being a mission specialist, and I got there because I went to the test pilot school as a flight test engineer. So I'm not a test pilot. Well, I wasn't in the Air Force a test pilot, but I was able to be a flight test engineer, like many other mission specialists, such as Ellison Onizuka, who passed in the Challenger, Jerry Ross, my friend Rex Walheim. There's almost always a flight test engineer in an astronaut class. So I figured that would be my next play, and I got into test pilot school, and it was amazing. It's a very long answer, but I was just so excited, because and it turns out that all that time I had in the cockpit, that I failed out of pilot training, made me a really good flight test engineer, because I knew how to talk to the pilots. And I had all that engineering background. I could do the engineering. And the Air Force said, "Wow, you're pretty good. What should we do with you?" And I said, "Well, I want to still go back into the fighter community. I'd like to test some fighter airplanes." And they said, "Well, we don't have anything at Edwards. We'll go with you to Eglin, Florida, which is in the Panhandle." And I got to fly in fighter airplanes, F-16s mainly, about every day. And I managed my own projects. It was so much fun. And that experience really helped me to really get the skills and the ripening, the experience, to help me when I started testing, helping, 10, 15 years later, testing new spacecraft. All of those things, when who imagined that we were going to need new spacecraft? But when Dragon and Starliner came along, I had that experience and that skill, and I was glad to be part of the team. Very, very, very long answer. I apologize.
No, but that gave me the color I needed. Actually, it's interesting. Joe Tegmeyer, who's been on this channel before, was in the same situation you were in when they downsized the Air Force at, the peace dividend. He ended up being a tanker pilot, and that became an entire career, a very interesting career for him. But and I had one question about your flying in the F-16s. So as an engineer, one thinks you sit in the back seat, but the F-16s, was that a single seater, and you flew that as an engineer pilot?
No, I was only qualified to fly in the back seat. Okay. With a test pilot in the front, but we were able to always work really well together. I was able to get the test data, the flight test points, and now and then the front seaters, the test pilots needed to keep up their basic skills as fighter pilots, right. And there's room in the back seat. So I learned a lot about the air-to-air combat and dissimilar air combat maneuvering and things like that, which for me was super fun. But it also made me a better engineer and understanding what the user needed. Right. So that worked out super well. So it was a very good match for me, and I think everybody enjoyed that time.
Did you not go to Japan as well in that period?
Yes. So we right at that time, the first President Bush worked out a deal with Japan that Japan wanted to build its own fighter, but that's very expensive. So we proposed that we use the F-16 as a basis with Lockheed Martin at the time. As they just transferred from General Dynamics, and so they started a joint project called the F-2 program, which was a basis of an F-16 with a lot of Japanese enhancements, bigger wings made out of composite material. They had longer range, different radar, those kind of things. But it was an interesting project to work on. The reason I got involved was in preparation, the flight test team from Japan came to visit the United States. They visited Edwards Air Force Base. They visited Eglin Air Force Base. They probably visited a few other places. It turns out that when I lived in Los Angeles, I went to night school to learn more things just because I like learning. So I picked up some basics of Japanese. So when our Japanese guests came, they asked me to host them, and I gave the briefing in Japanese language.
Wow.
A week later, I got a phone call from a colonel, back when colonels were very old people, and he called me from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and said, "You're going to Japan. We're going to need you to be a flight test liaison. You're not going to be flying very much, if at all, but you have a unique skill set. We need you." And I don't think I had a very much choice. They cut orders. They're not suggestions, they're orders. And I found myself headed to Japan. Right before I left for Japan in January of 1996, I went to an astronaut interview, and I was just happy in my life just to have an interview. Especially at that time, they were hiring classes every 2 years, and I barely made the cut for time in the Air Force. Experience wise, I was a little bit very much on the young side. So I was just glad for the interview. I didn't think that anything was going to work out of it. But it turns out 3 or 4 months later, after I was working in Japan and just getting used to it, getting actually pretty good at it, they called me and said, "Would you like to come to Houston?" And I had mixed feelings because I really liked the team I was on, but this was a dream come true.
An amazing story. I mean, there probably are very few people in the world who can speak Japanese, Russian, and are test pilots. I mean, it seemed like a no-brainer to choose you. I mean, I know you probably didn't feel that at the time, but when one thinks about it, it's quite amazing. Now, before you actually launched as an astronaut, you're involved in some underwater testing and cave dwelling. What was that story all about, Mike?
Boy, you're bringing back some really great memories. and to be honest, those skills of language, we all have different talents. I can't dance, I can't sing. There's probably a lot of things that I'm not good at. But certainly getting a chance to talk and express in different languages for me is really enjoyable. So it's and I think those skills and what I told to the astronaut selection committee that if you're building an international space station, I think I can help. And it surely paid off for especially this last flight. I had Japanese crewmate and Russian crewmates, and we all got along super well. These other things is especially at the beginning of space station, we didn't have a lot of experience as Americans on what it's like to live for long durations away from home. Space shuttle missions only lasted up to maybe 2 weeks at the time. All of our trips to the moon were on the order of 10 days or so, not too much longer. We started the phase 1 of the International Space Station by flying American astronauts on Russian space station Mir. So we were trying to get our new astronauts a chance to have analogous experiences, right? So we had a chance to work with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA. They had an underwater habitat, and we said, "Hi, we're NASA. We have some money. We'd like to train our astronauts to live in a strange and extreme environment." So we put together a NEMO mission, many NEMO missions, NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. also named after the movie that was quite popular at the time, which was based after Jules Verne's, Captain Nobody, Captain Nemo. So, but our crew was the second crew to go on a NASA Nemo mission, and we were the first operational mission. So that was a big honor to be part of that team. Fortunately, coincidentally, I was there with such folks as like Sunita Williams, and we've been working together, for such a long time. And Dan Tani, who was a classmate of mine in the class of 1996, he had just come back from a space flight, so he was a veteran to tell us what it was like to be in space. And then we translated what we were seeing under the water and into space. And boy, what a neat mission that was. And then subsequently, many years later, 10 or 11 years later, a similar analog opportunity came along, and this time I was the veteran to share it with some of the newer folks, and we lived in a cave system in Sardinia, Italy, and it was definitely a challenging mission with all of the climbing and exploring that we had to do in a very strange environment. But it was very amazing, and it was a great opportunity to bring new astronauts into the fold. Andy Mogensen was there from Denmark, and we had David Saint-Jacques from Canada, and it was just fun watching the new guys learn what it's like to be an astronaut and set them up for successful missions to the space station.
So that brings us to your space station or your space experience. I mean, you have had the most extraordinarily varied career in space that I can imagine. I'm not sure there's another astronaut that could equal that. You start by traveling Russian. You travel. I mean, tell us about your experience traveling in these Russian spaceships. I mean, it sounds like there wasn't much space in those spaceships, right? Tell us.
Oh, we've met, and I'm very sure I did not impress you with my towering physique. It was good that it turns out I'm not Russian. I don't have any Russian ancestry that I know of, but I have the same physique as a 1960s Soviet man. So kind of short, a little bit wide, and I fit very nicely into the Soyuz. But another twist of fate and how the world keeps changing on us. We woke up one morning and the space shuttle was coming home, and my friends perished on the entry, and right over throughout Texas, and they were either my class or the class that came right before us. We knew everybody super well. We knew their families, and it was just a horrible day. But that also meant strategically to the United States space program, we didn't have a way to go up to the space station. We were in the middle of our 6th expedition. We really needed to continue flying to the space station, and at that time, the Russians generously and kindly, which if you know Russian culture, there's when you have a true friend, you're there for them no matter what. And the Russians were, especially at that time, I know things are a lot different, but they just said, no problem, just let's continue flying together. We can fly on Soyuz. And so the Expedition 6 crew came back home on their lifeboat Soyuz. Expedition 7 flew up on Soyuz. There's only been 2 or 3 Americans that ever flown on Soyuz before that. And by the time, and then a year later, we were Expedition 9, April 4th, I think, 2004. We launched from Kazakhstan and from the same launch pad that Yuri Gagarin launched from. So for me, that was just an amazing thing. I thought, when I left Japan in 1996, I thought I'd be flying on a space shuttle mission by 1998, 1999, 2000 at the latest. Here we are in 2004, not on the space shuttle, not on a short mission, but on a long mission with just one other guy aboard the International Space Station for 6 months. And it was just amazing. I got to be the co-pilot. So all that pilot training that didn't work out for me, I still had a lot of those skills the language skills that I had from being an exchange student in Soviet Union, operational skills I had from all the flight testing really helped me to be able to be a very good help to the commander of the Soyuz, and to be able to fly a foreign spacecraft and then do very well aboard the International Space Station, including because everybody felt confident even though I was a rookie, that I was good enough that I could go out on spacewalks in the Russian spacesuits, and we did 4 spacewalks in the Russian spacesuit on my very first mission. It was very strange and very strange time, but it was also a time where we learned that we can depend on each other, and that every country can bring something to the space program.
So there are 2 questions I want to ask about that experience, because that's an extraordinary experience. First, I really want to know what the Soyuz was like, what is like. I mean, it's the same Soyuz still flying. And the other thing is your first experience in spacewalking. To me, it's like a very frightening thought, getting out there in that spacesuit. So let's start with Soyuz. Tell us a little bit about Soyuz.
Yeah, so Soyuz was originally built and conceived in the 1960s to be kind of a counterpart to Apollo. Soyuzes were going to go to the moon as part of their original plan. And then with the shift of Soviet Union not going to the moon, they became a transport to early Soviet space stations, such as the Almaz and the Soyuz. So then they became slightly modernized. So it was a Soyuz TM that I first learned training on, but it was still an analog cockpit with what we call steam gauges and push buttons and a very small cathode ray tube screen. And for the Soyuz to be a decent lifeboat, which was its original purpose aboard the International Space Station, it couldn't accommodate a lot of tall people and American astronauts. So we have a fair amount of tall people that could fit into the space shuttle, but they couldn't fit into the Soyuz. So we worked a plan with the Russians. They wanted to update their cockpit to be a glass cockpit, and it would be a lot smaller, which would give more knee room and leg room for our taller astronauts. So we have then we moved to a Soyuz TMA, and A stand for anthropomorphic or American, depending on who you want to ask. So the Soyuz TMA just came online. Expedition 6, when they came back, they landed on the first Soyuz TMA. They had a ballistic entry instead of a regular entry. We were very worried about them when they came back. So there was a lot of things going through our minds with the relatively brand new spacecraft, launching Yuri Gagarin's launch pad, fitting in nicely. And we also flew up with a Dutch astronaut, André Kuipers. He's a great guy. He stayed for 10 days and then left me and Gennady Padalka aboard the space station for 6 months. The Soyuz was amazing. It was an honor and a privilege. I just couldn't imagine growing up that an American kid from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, would be walking to the launch pad wearing Soviet era spacesuit onto Yuri Gagarin's launch pad. And it was an amazing day.
The outfitting of the Soyuz with digital equipment, was that helped by U.S. technology, or did they do that all by themselves?
It was really helped by U.S. funding. So it was in our interest to have a Soyuz that was more capable and also had more legroom. And so that was it was safer for our crews to come home on. At that point, it was just it was a lifeboat, and we actually used it for Expedition 6. But up until that point, we thought the space shuttle would be delivering crews, and the Soyuz would just be the lifeboat, and that would be part of Russia's contribution. Then things changed.
And how was the landing with Soyuz? I know it lands on land, but was it very bumpy? Well, I mean, I've heard some stories, but I don't know the.
Yeah, we the Soyuz is just amazing. The Russians are very solid engineers, and they really know how to mass produce. That's maybe not the right word, but continuously produce quality Soyuzes that can come back. So we felt the reliability was going to be great. When we came back through the atmosphere, it was amazing. I had a window seat, and there's a ablative heat shield, and it just melts off. It's great technology. It's not super efficient or elegant, but it works every time. And there's extra reserve, and it's just watching your spacecraft melt. This far away, a third of a meter away from your nose is, and you can actually feel the heat a little bit. It's not hot inside, but you can tell that it's hot outside, and it's just an amazing entry. There's one parachute, and it comes off on the side, and then you spin around like this, and then it reefs itself to be up on top, and then you settle down. The actual landing, where it's slowed down by a soft rocket engine, I think that's the English translation, and it goes a soft landing engine. Sorry, and it ignites about 1 meter right before we hit the ground, and it's supposedly softens the landing. That said, I felt that when we landed that it did not work. They pulled me out of the spacecraft, and I said, "Hey, how come our soft landing engine didn't work?" Because it was a very solid, firm landing. And they said it did. I said, "No, it didn't. There's no way that it worked." And so they carried me around. They wouldn't let me walk. I felt I could walk, but they carried me around in that big chair and took me to the back of the spacecraft and said, "Look, there's the engine. You could tell that it worked." I said, didn't feel it. But it was just amazing to come back. The technology it takes to send humans into space and to bring them back safely is just super amazing. We make it look routine these days, but it never is. And to have a chance to fly on Soyuz not once but twice, and then compare that to Space Shuttle, compare that to Splashdown and Dragon, I've been very fortunate. I've also been here for a very long time, 30 years coming up.
It's amazing. 30 years. Wow.
Goes by fast.
So the shuttle is a completely different experience, right?
Absolutely.
And so is it kind of like flying in first class luxury compared to the Soyuz? What was your
words, not mine, but yes, there was leg room. There was all you could eat, and there's so much other cabin room, things like that. Whereas on the Soyuz, it took us, nowadays with Soyuz, you can get into docking and within like 4 hours. In the shuttle, it took us 2.5 days. So we had plenty of time to enjoy inside the space shuttle. You're there with a lot of friends. Soyuz, you're very close with 2 friends, and on shuttle, I was there with 5 other people. We could have had up to 7 other people, 8 people aboard shuttle. We had a crew of 6. I hadn't, even though it was near the end of the space shuttle program, I had not had a chance. It was already 12 or 13 years at NASA that I was there, and I didn't have a chance to fly on shuttle. So I was very, very fortunate to fly on one of the last space shuttles. And so I didn't know all the American traditions and American way of doing things because I'd been doing Russian things for so long, including backup missions. So it was a joy, but also I think some of my instructors when I first started, they're there. You've been in the program for a long time, but you don't know very much. Like, you don't know very much about space shuttle. So please teach me.
And I guess the answer came in Russian. I don't know. So what about the spacesuits? So you did your spacewalks in a Russian spacesuit. Now you've done walks in American. You have walked in an American spacesuit, right?
Yes, 3 times. The American spacesuit's called the Extravehicular Mobility Unit, EMU, and they were all mass produced at the beginning of Space Shuttle program, and we're still using the same suits to this day. So they're getting old. They're like some of those suits are like 40 years old.
Wow.
The technology is great. And we've made some improvements, of course, with some enhanced caution and warning and things like that. But it's still pretty much the same suit. And we've the nice thing about the EMU is that its middle name is mobility. The pressure inside the suit is a lot less. It's less than what we have in the Russian Orlan suit, so it's easier to move. The dexterity is a little bit better. I wore custom gloves that were made just for my hands. Were Russian size. They give you size 1, 2, or 3. I was size 1, and they were pretty good. The American gloves, they spent a lot of extra to give us that extra fine control, which especially if you're working on something like the Hubble Space Telescope or very delicate operations to make the space station, that extra dexterity and that extra mobility is definitely useful. And when we were doing our spacewalks from the space shuttle through the station airlock, it was very that extra mobility was definitely appreciated. But that also meant that we had a longer pre-breathe time. We had to be in the suit breathing oxygen longer because we went to a lower pressure. The American suit is a little bit tougher to put on. A Russian suit, you can put it on by yourself. It's just kind of one piece. You step in through the backpack and you use a handle and close the backpack door, and it latches shut. American suit, you have a special team that helps you. The intervehicular, the IV team, helps put on your pants and make sure and your helmet and things like that. And that system, the American system, also works very well. And now that so if you look at some of our new spacesuit designs, including the ones that we're talking about going to the moon, you'll see that the Americans took some ideas and some of the good ideas from Russian kind of spacesuit, and so there's a lot to be learned when different human ideas come together and take the best of all the worlds.
Mike, what's it like floating out there? I mean, was it scary at first? Was it exhilarating? What was your general? What was the general feeling when you first stepped out there?
It was euphoria is probably too strong of a term, but there was a feeling of happiness and joy, not fear. I was younger at the time, so maybe I didn't know better, but I was really confident based on all the training we had. We have a great team that makes sure that they're not going to send us outside unless we're ready, and we were ready to go outside. When I first got into the astronaut program, our class was told by some senior astronauts that only the very tall people with very long arms are going to ever do spacewalks, and if you weren't tall with very long arms, you did not really have a chance. So just set your expectations. And then on my very first mission, I got to do 4 spacewalks. So I was also I wasn't sure I was ever going to get a chance to do one, and I ended up doing 4. So I was very happy that I had a chance to do that. And it turns out I felt I was pretty good at it. Not the greatest in the universe, but I definitely worked really well with Gennady, and we got the space station ready for the European Autonomous Transfer Vehicle, the ATV, to come up and dock to space station, and it was pretty amazing to be able to do that and work on the outside of a space station with Gennady in Russian language. We also had to fix something on the American side, which is why we had 4 EVAs to go over to the American side, which the American EMUs were not functioning at the time. So we had to do not an emergency, but a highly critical spacewalk over to the American side, which hadn't been done in Russian Orlan. But we had a chance Gennady and I had a chance to show that it could be done. And it was just an amazing experience. Wow. So I was feeling very happy. You see the whole universe out there in front of you. And the only thing between you and the stars is the plexiglass, polycarbonate helmet, and it's amazing.
I can't even begin to imagine it. But what an exhilarating view! What an exhilarating life you've had, and you're married and with 3 kids, and your wife, I understand, is from Assam in northwest India.
Northeast.
East India. You're right. I got to orient myself. And you have 3 kids. They're all grown now, right?
Yes, our youngest is now finishing high school and determining which university she will attend. But she's our only engineer, so we have high hopes for her.
Any chance of budding astronaut?
We'll see.
Okay.
What does it mean to be an astronaut these days? And the opportunities to fly in space are much different than they were in the 1980s and 1990s. It's a whole new world out there, and folks, many more people are going to have the opportunity to fly in space. There's only been 700 people or so to fly in space, and that's the past 50 or 60 years of human spaceflight. We can do better. We can do better.
And we're going to go to the moon now, and perhaps even beyond.
I hope so, and that's what would be very motivating in this phase of my life, is to take all of these experiences and understand how much the world can change and how we can be ready for it. And sometimes you just can't be prepared. You and I, we've seen how much the world changes and how much it's changing right now, and to help the next generations to be ready for that, and to take our experiences and to make space flight better, and to take us to the moon and Mars and beyond.
That's very inspiring. I have one question that I have to ask because of my audience, and that is, you flew Dragon. So just give us a sense of that compared to all the other vehicles that you've flown in, and there are many.
Yes. So we just returned from SpaceX, and I got my Dragon pilot wings. So finally, I graduated, and I'm a real pilot now. So Dragon, it was a joy and pleasure. In 2014, when NASA awarded the contract to Boeing and to SpaceX for a commercial crew program to make Dragons and Starliners to take us back and forth to the International Space Station, especially since we didn't have shuttle anymore, didn't want to be relying totally on Soyuz. And the Starliner is a completely different story, but Dragon is a really good story. They were SpaceX was the, what do you say, the long pole, the secret hope, the Hail Mary, at the time. And we were very lucky. SpaceX really took their job seriously. It was a lot of healthy tension at the beginning on what Dragon should be. And then SpaceX said, all right, we understand what we need to do. And they went off and did it. I got to be part of that. And then I went off to join the Starliner team to try to get them on track. And then I ended up with the series of events to end up flying on a Dragon. Dragon has this, it's modern looking, has a great aesthetic, plenty of leg room. I got to actually fly in a brand new suit. It looked exactly the same as the other suit, but underneath the cover was a completely different mechanism. And SpaceX asked me when I joined if they didn't mind. We worked with the NASA programs, of course, but they said, hey, we'd like to try a new suit. You're a great candidate for it. We don't have an old suit that fits you. We need to make a new one anyway. Do you mind being a test pilot for a new suit? And I said, you got the right guy. I know how to test the new things, and I can give you the best data, and we'll work together to iron out any bugs and to make sure it's a great suit. And it worked out. It worked out very well. That meant staying late at night, after all the official training to try different pieces of the suit and to take it on, put it off, or take it off, put it on, all these extra things, but it worked out nicely. The Dragon itself, beautiful cockpit. He gives us situational awareness, but in an ideal flight, we don't have to touch any buttons, except maybe turn on the lights, turn off the lights, set up, make sure you're talking to the right control center, with a few comm configurations. And Dragon performed beautifully on the way up and the way down. We didn't really have any cautions or warnings or advisories. And we were the sixth flight of Dragon Endeavour. And I was very proud of the SpaceX team. And they also showed a great deal of flexibility when we needed to come home earlier than we thought. They were ready for us to come home within days. We chose a week. That was a much better, safer answer. And Dragon brought us home safely. And the splashdown was my first splashdown, so I didn't know what one would feel like. And we ended up, it was calm waters, 2 or 3 in the morning, right off of San Diego. the Pacific Ocean can be Pacific, very calm. And it was a beautiful splashdown. Dolphins came to visit us. And an hour after splashdown, we were opening the hatch and getting checked out.
Yeah, I watched you coming out. I was very nervous about that splashdown, very nervous. We didn't know what had really happened, and we didn't know if everybody was well. We had no clue, but everybody was calm. It seemed to go very well, and we were very delighted to see everybody walk off there and seem to walk right off. It seemed to be fine. So, Mike, it's been such a pleasure having you on the Maverick Mind. You certainly have been a maverick in so many ways in your lifetime. It's just amazing. Probably the broadest experience of any astronaut there's ever been. I mean, just an extraordinary story of a life story, and just happy that you're so vitally with us now, and looking forward to many. Are you going to be flying again? What's in the future for Mike Fincke?
That is a very good question. I hope in 6 months from now we can answer that question. But right now we're just in a process of recuperation. Our space agency is changing right underneath us.
Yeah.
We'll see where I can serve best next. Looking forward to it. I think I have a lot to offer any team that would have me. But in the meantime, it's what I've learned along the way is part of being having a maverick mind is that if you look at my story, there's a lot of, I don't say failures along the way, but non-optimal situations. Failing out of pilot training. Oh my goodness, that could have been the end of my life. And I didn't have the option to go become a tanker pilot. It was pretty much you get to fly a fighter or nothing. Yeah. It's like, really? So I envy your previous guest, but there's adventure to be had. And if we can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off and keep moving forward, having that resilience in abilities, and also being able to deal with disappointment as well as dealing with joy, that makes a very interesting life. And I'm really glad to share some of my stories with our audience. And Larry, I look forward to working with you some more and continuing on sharing stories. I want to hear more of your story, and there's more of your story than there is of mine. So make proper time for it, sir.
Only about 20 years, Mike. Only about 20 or more. Thanks so much for being with us. And we really had a great time having you here because it's very inspiring. Very inspiring. Appreciate it, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll continue to keep in touch. Thank you, Will.